Hey guys, welcome to Seer Generation. I am your host, Manny Nunez. Today we have a conversation with Sophie Franco. She works as an individual therapist. This interview was definitely an eye-opener for me. I learned so much about the field and what it really takes to be able to connect with somebody that's going through some type of trauma or issue and really be able to offer them the resources that they need in order to be able to succeed. In our conversation, we talk about the importance of finding somebody that can relate to you. I didn't think about this before, but it makes sense. Sometimes it helps to be able to have a therapist that understands your culture, that maybe and possibly has a similar background than you do. So when you're sharing those moments that relate to you, to your family, they're able to truly understand what's going on there. We dig into techniques and things that you and I can utilize today during these times to be able to cope with the different feelings or negative feelings that we are encountering. And overall, we just talk a lot about different techniques that she shares that we can utilize to be able to help us be able to deal and work through the difficult moments of life that may come up. This was definitely an interesting conversation, one of my favorites, and I know you guys will enjoy it. Hey Sophie, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Manny?
I'm doing well. um, so I wanted to have you on because I looked at your profile on LinkedIn and I saw that you worked a lot with the community, and I really just wanted to have some time to talk to you about your experience. My community is something that I've been, for whatever reason, just contemplating a lot more lately, and I want to also see in what ways that I can also get involved. Something simple in Lawrence specifically. I'll just speak about my town. Sometimes you see a lot of homeless people, and you tend to give like $1 or two or something like that. But outside of that, it's I'm not sure like what resources, and I'm sure I can talk to people, but it's good to kind of hear the perspective of somebody that has worked in community programs and things like that. So I guess my first question for you is, what is the amazing Sophie up to today?
I don't know about amazing, but I am a wife, a mother, a sister, a friend. So I'm constantly speaking to different people in those different areas of my life. And as far as what I do for work, I'm an individual therapist at a local community agency or a local community clinic. So however you want to put it in there. Under the behavioral health department. So there I see a whole lot of different people from different cultures providing community resources. And when I say community resources, it means additional support that maybe is not offered at our clinic, but we strive to connect with people and meet them where they're at, whether it's working with one of our individual therapists or providing them with what they really need, because sometimes it's not individual therapy. Sometimes they need a little bit more like simple things like resume building, and they don't know where to go. So it's just really seeing what the need is and trying our best to meet that need for the individual that walks into our clinic.
So individual therapist, does that like is that general, like on purpose? Like could somebody go and speak with you about anything that's going on, or is it a little bit more specific?
So maybe I should tell you what my specific background is in. So educational background. I have a master's in education, and my concentration is mental health counseling and trauma. So when patients are referred to the counseling department, it could be because of an array of issues. Most recently is because of a lot of anxiety because of the recent pandemic, right? So it's depression, domestic violence situations because of being cooped in one place. So people don't know what else to do other than just being indoors. However, it's different in the state that I'm in. I'm in Texas, where laws are a little bit loose or looser than in other states. I know that in Massachusetts, there are very strict laws, like with the virtual school and all that stuff. So we get to see not only people coming in because of the pandemic, but like I said before, just regular domestic violence, a lot of trauma. In this area, we have a lot of sex trafficking. So we
Wow.
see, yes, all types of trauma. So you name it, we'll see it.
That's intense. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that the laws in Texas are looser. Do you mean in what people can go and see you for, or just more whatever's happening, there may be more stricter kind of laws against those things in other states than in Texas?
Well, so for example, what I can file for in Massachusetts won't necessarily be fileable in Texas. So
Mm.
fileable is like a 51A. So to report any type of abuse. So I'm a mandated reporter, like teachers are mandated reporters, doctors are mandated reporters. So I've had to adjust what I learned in Massachusetts and try to incorporate it here. And I have found some situations where I think this person is in need of, rescuing literally. And because of certain laws, for example, in Massachusetts, it is said there's strict laws around corporal punishment. Here, those laws are pretty vague. So people get away with more things than not. But I think it also depends on which social worker's lap the case falls on.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
So that's very interesting. I guess the my question is, as I'm thinking about this, is not necessarily which one do you prefer, but I guess which one have you found that, or you think that might be a little bit more beneficial for somebody that would go see you, because Massachusetts a little bit more stricter. Maybe you file a lot more, or in Texas you don't. Is it somewhere in the middle? Do you think that one benefits more the individual, or like what are your thoughts on that since you've experienced kind of both sides?
Are you asking which state do I prefer uh, working this type of job in?
Oh no,
Or,
oh sorry, not necessarily working, but I guess like you said that one side the laws are a little bit more stricter, and on the other
Mhm,
side they're a little bit looser, and you find
mhm.
yourself that maybe something that you're seeing now maybe you can't necessarily file for. What's So I guess the question is, is stricter better or loose better, or is there like a fine line? What are your thoughts on laws in that respect?
Either way, I am going to file because
Oh,
I
okay.
something um, in my conscience that's gonna cause me to feel worried. So if I have a concern, I'm gonna file. Whether it's uh, there's a particular word for it, if they take it under investigation
Mhm.
or not. At least I know that I'm doing my due diligence in reporting something that is of concern. Mhm.
Gotcha. Oh, okay, I see. So whatever it is that comes out of your office, then it's up to another department or somewhere else that's going to choose whether they do investigate or not. Okay.
Right. So in
Gotcha.
Massachusetts, it's called the Department of Children and Families. If I'm reporting about a minor, but here it's called CPS, Child Protective Services, which is pretty essentially the same thing, but they just different acronyms.
Gotcha. So how do you end up working in this industry? Like what drove you to it? How do you end up here where you are?
I've always known that I wanted to help people, but I never really knew what that was going to look like. I've always liked the medical field, and at one point I was thinking that I was gonna be an ultrasound tech at a local hospital or clinic. But psychology was always something that really intrigued me. So I just kept on taking my undergrad studies, and I said, I'm gonna finish undergrad in psychology. And I knew that I couldn't become a therapist with just a bachelor's. I mean, there are certain places that though there are people use the term therapists and they have bachelors, but there's certain things you can't bill for. So I knew that I needed higher education once I figured out I want to be a therapist, because there aren't many therapists of color, or there weren't many therapists of color in Massachusetts where I started my studies. And I wanted people of color to find somebody that looked like them in a counseling office, especially young people who would go like even to a school counselor and find somebody that doesn't understand their culture. So that was my experience at school. None of my school counselors were ever people of color. And I lived in Lawrence. I grew up in Lawrence. And you think they'll have a counselor that looks like us to understand us better. But that wasn't my experience. So that was one strong driver in me wanting to be in this type of position, because I wanted to show young people that they can be understood, they can be heard. Someone's not going to look down on them because, let's say, something that happened to me, and this was said at a professional seminar by someone that was not of color. They said, oh, but what if those people only had rice and beans to eat? Hispanics tend to eat that pretty regularly, and that's not a bad thing. So I feel the need to be very culturally sensitive, not only with Latinos, but with just anyone, someone that could be from Asia, somewhere in Africa, wherever, Poland, and that's important to me, because in order to help a person grow, you have to want to know more about them and understand them as best as possible. So I'm not sure if that's your question.
That's awesome to hear, because I mean, just thinking about what you do, and it sounds like you work a lot with families. That I mean, the family dynamic is gonna range so much between cultures, and maybe what would work with one family may not work for another. And I think that in this case is being able to see somebody that understands you and where you're coming from. I think would have been extremely beneficial, I would think. But even just being able to relate, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a solution, but if I'm talking to somebody and I have an issue and they're not even getting me, I'm not sure how far you'd be able to get.
Well, something else that I will say is that I not only am doing this for work now, but I too was a patient once, years ago. So I had that experience of being with a therapist who literally looked down at me or said, why do you do that? Over something that was really simple, that was part of my culture. So of course that was a turnoff, and needless to say, I didn't return to that provider. But then I had a positive experience with somebody else who was not of the same culture, but really was intentional about learning why I behaved the way that I did and why certain things were the norm in my culture. So it's not to say that every person that's not of the same culture, it does not have that ability. Yes, I'm there. If you really want to learn and help the individual that's in your office, you can do that just by being empathetic and not having, so many assumptions about things. It's about taking advantage of that time and really getting to know the other person, to let them know, I'm human too. I make mistakes. I don't know all the answers. I tell that to all of my patients, and that it's a collaborative approach. It's not that you're coming to see this person that's a know-it-all and they're going to fix you. No,
Right.
no. It's about a journey, and we're going to walk through it together, and you're going to make your own decisions in this journey with some guidance. And the ultimate goal is for the person to feel better. Another ultimate goal is for the person to walk into my office telling me, Sophie, I am feeling confident, I am feeling empowered, and I don't need this anymore. And that's going to be a good thing. I tell this to everybody. And I say, it's not because we're not going to see each other anymore. It's because you are going to have the right tools to help yourself. And that's the goal.
Gotcha. Do you feel that a lot of the individuals that they end up having to see, is it a lack of feeling understood, having people in their lives that are not understanding what they're going through?
That's part of it. That's not the whole.
Right.
I mentioned histories of trauma. Sometimes I'm the first person that someone tells about their trauma. I've had adults that things have happened to them in their childhood, and I was the first person that they told. And, one, I feel honored that they had, that they trusted me with such sensitive information. So I take it very serious. And something else that where I actually work now, we have a confidential software where, although it's a clinic where we work at, our notes have a privacy protection so that no one can click on our notes and see the details of our notes. Only myself and the other counselors, we can see each other's notes, but nobody else can see our notes because of sometimes the sensitive nature of what's disclosed.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to be careful, especially in today's age with all the hackings going on. And I mean, you just never know who's trying to get into your data. I had a person not too long ago that reached out saying that their WhatsApp or whatever got hacked, and that, people were sending messages asking for money as that person. Yeah,
Mm-mm.
it's crazy, but you definitely got to try to be careful, especially since we're moving more into like digital communications just in general. Um, when as I'm hearing, man, that's a lot of I don't want to say I don't think trauma is the right word, but I think that it sounds like you come into a lot of different situations that are difficult. And it reminds me when my wife and I first got married, she worked for a community program, and I think she did it for a year. But I just remember that we would sit at the dinner table, and she was just sad, man. Like, she
Mm-hmm.
dealt with all these different traumas and kids that are wow, what's the word? There was a specific word when like things were very severe. I forget the name of it. But essentially, she dealt with a lot of families and a lot of kids that were having a difficult time for whatever reason. For her, after a year, it wasn't something that she was going to be able to do long term, just because of the mental effect that it was having on her. How do you manage and deal with that, trying to help people?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the word that you were looking for was adverse childhood experiences. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, so we deal a lot with that. So because we are human, it's very important to have self-care days. That consists of a lot of different things. So I make sure that at least once a month, I take a day or two off um, to
Mhm.
decompress, because it's true. There is something called as vicarious trauma. You think it's like you carry such load, and because we're not computers, it's just close the computer and the information just stays there. No, we are human beings with feelings as well, emotions. So sometimes I want to rescue somebody, but I know that I can't. I can provide certain resources, but then individuals have choices to make for themselves. So as far as self-care, uh, I enjoy massages. So maybe you're
Nice.
things that go on under self-care. I mean, now with COVID, I have not gotten one, but I do get like my nails done. Yes. So people tend to comment on my nails because they're always done. That is my thing. Also, I enjoy singing. I enjoy connecting with my faith. And for me, that's the most important thing.
Oh, gotcha. So really trying to take a few days to step away from, is it easy to turn it off, or does that kind of linger in your mind? Because even from, I mean, I can't even imagine having to carry, that in my head. I mean, I work in technology, and even I could be watching TV with my wife, or I'm having a conversation, and like, oh, something comes in about something at work. Does that ever happen to you? I would think it does, but.
It very often, but you learn to, you know how they say, leave work at work and don't bring it home. It's easier said than done. But as long as, like for me, as long as I know that I tried my best is enough. So the same thing that I tell my patients, your best is enough. That's it. My conscience is clear. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to automatically stop thinking about the different scenarios that, presented in my office. It just means that I have a clear conscience to know that I did a good job. But then there are some times where it's like, could I have done more? But then I remind myself, I try to practice what I preach. So we talk a lot about reframing our thinking, and we counter things with the truth. The truth of the matter, XYZ presented itself, and you took ABC steps, and that was enough. That was sufficient. We know that in one session we can't solve it all. And the same thing that I tell people, we're taking baby steps. So I have to practice that same love, patience, and kindness that we give to babies. I have to give that to myself.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned that it's impossible to solve whatever is going on in one day. And I'm sure that every patient varies, but do you end up seeing somebody like for, let's say, like a year? Like, is that a space where you'd be able to do something like that, or is it kind of like shorter time frames, like 3 months?
Oh, it depends. There have been people who have come in with incredible trauma histories that have shown great resiliency. It really depends on each individual. And I always ask the question, how much do you want to get better? Are you willing to put in the work? Because reality is, I always tell people, we might only see each other once a week, maybe once every 2, once every 3. I tell people, I'm going to work with your schedule. And hopefully it fits in with mine. But I like to give people concrete steps. So I have the different sheets with that talk about different diagnoses. And it could very simple, nothing lengthy for them to read. But it could be a picture with words around it. And we can talk about, how do you relate to this? What do you see when you look at this? So those sheets, people end up telling me that they'll take them home, place it somewhere where they could see it as a reminder of what we spoke about in session, so that in that in-between time between the next one session to the other, they'll be working on things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to have the motivation to engage in the things that we spoke about. And that's okay. I'm not going to shun anyone. So we'll talk about any benefits and challenges endured in between session. And it's just an ongoing thing. And, I'll praise people for just coming to session. That's huge, and like I said, progress is going to vary from person to person, and, depending on their situation. So yes, I've seen people for just 3 sessions and they feel great. I've seen people for 6 months. I've seen people for a year. But always my goal is like to be a cheerleader and say, you got this, you can do this. There are people who are very draining too. So, but it's okay. I have to know that when I'm feeling that way, that means I need to step back a little and remember, this is not my issue. This is the person's issue, and they came for some support. So allow people to make their own choices and be okay with whatever it is.
Oh man, that must be. I just think I think about myself, and I just look. I'm not as emotional. My wife is kind of like the emotional like reminder for me. Like if I have a conversation with somebody, whatever, we're out to dinner, and then she'll come back and say, "Hey, remember this? You should have really like been a little bit more empathetic, etc." So for me, it's very tough to put myself in the other person's shoes. Um, I admire people that can do that, to be honest with you, because it's something that I lack, something that I work on. I don't think that I'm ever gonna be able to do something like what you do, but I do try to get better, and hopefully I am. I mean, my wife from time to time, does say like, hey, you're getting better here and there, but I always gotta check in because I never know for sure. Sometimes, have a conversation and then I'm like, hey, did I step the line or was I a little bit too rude there?
Well, honesty is the best policy. So that is something else that I tell my patients. We need to be honest first with ourselves. And then if you really want this to work for you, then we need to be honest with each other. Because there have been those times where I've caught people in lies, but I just kind of sit back, relax, and see how far it's going to go. That's okay.
Gotcha.
Again, it's not my issue. I'm just here to try to support as best as possible. So.
That's it's kind of it's so I'm thinking of it more from like, I don't want to say a business perspective, but just like, for example, for me, if I have a project, uh my goal is to finish that project so I can, I guess, go on to the next one, right? So like, and I don't want to assume, but I would think, for somebody that's doing what you're doing, maybe, I mean, I'm sure every job maybe works a little bit differently, but I would think that the goal at the end of the day is to get that person to a point when they're better, and then, moving on to the next one. But it's almost like you're putting yourself out of a job to an extent, right? Like, oh,
You use a term that I do use. I do say that I am trying to get myself out of a job, but this is it's in a good way, because as I do that, it's because the person is feeling equipped and ready to manage their situation without additional outside support. So yes, I am of that thought, but there are other providers who tend to keep patients on for longer. I don't want to speak negatively, but that does happen because at the end of the day, it is a business. It is a type of business. But I'm in the business of equipping people or helping people equip themselves with tools so that, I don't need to be in their lives forever. You know,
right.
that really is my goal. That means that I'm going to be able to help a good number of people. And it also helps me not become attached to individuals, because that can happen as well. There's always, those patients that were happy, to come in. And there are others that were just like, oh, here comes so-and-so. Let's see how they're going to present today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting because obviously all that you're working on is like interpersonal relationship. I'm sure it's impossible to develop some sort of attachment to the person that you're working with, because you want them to do well. You're speaking with them on a weekly basis. Um, how does that look like once that patient is out of the office? You don't work with them anymore. You don't have contact with them. Is that like how that would work?
So we have ethical guidelines that we have to follow. I don't have the specifics off the top of my head, but there are very strict rules that we would have to
Right.
follow. Like, and the craziest thing is that when they created these ethical guidelines is because every single one of those things under the guidelines occurred. For example,
Oh.
do not date your patient. Yes, that, yep. Or, do not have sexual intercourse with your patient. Those kinds of things have happened, unfortunately. So it baffles me that has to be put in a set of ethical guidelines, because,
It
they
happened.
have happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no,
That's
we have specific rules to follow. Also, social workers that do the same work have their own ethical guidelines as well that are very similar to ours as well.
That's so crazy because I mean, you're seeing people that are in a very vulnerable state, right? And they're seeing you almost as that authority figure that's gonna like help them out and show them the way. And it's I don't know. So it would almost shame on those people because it's almost like you're taking advantage of what's happening and the position that you're in to, do all that stuff. It's I don't know. It's crazy. I can't believe it, but at the same time, it's just like shameful.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I really try to tell people that they are the expert of themselves. And I'm just a guide. And I think just saying those words is helpful for people that, especially people with low self-esteem, who have that, low self-worth. And it helps them know that their opinion matters. You wouldn't believe the number of people who are afraid to speak up for themselves over the smallest things that you think, oh, but why not? Um, so for me is also understanding that, because there's been, times in my life where I've thought, oh, well, my opinion doesn't count, so I'm just not going to do that. But no, everybody's story is important because your story can help somebody else that's going through something that's similar. So what you have to give is important, whether it's just for one person, I mean, especially for yourself, but I believe that everyone can help somebody else in
right.
one way or another.
You mentioned self-esteem. If I were to ask you, where does low self-esteem come from? Like what comes to your mind?
A lot of
That's something that
things,
I think a lot of people struggle with.
I believe there's this thing called nature versus nurture. So is it your environment? Is it your culture? Is it just you um, allowing negative thoughts to remain in your mind? So it's not one thing that causes self-esteem. It could be a variety of things. And that's something that we see a lot nowadays, especially because of the access of social media, because everyone wants to look like this actor or actress that's been photoshopped 5,000 times. And then if they don't look like that or sound like that or have certain things, then it's like people devalue themselves. And that's just one example, but we see it a lot now. And it's not only teenagers. You think, oh no, this is a teenage problem. No, adults also go through it as well. So it's like you start comparing yourself to everyone that you see, and that just becomes a part of you. So it's a cycle. So to get out of it, it's not as easy to just say, oh, get over it. Everyone, there's always going to be somebody that has it worse than you. But no, my situation right now sucks. So, I talk to patients in regular language. I don't, speak in big terms or anything like that. And I think people like that too, because, you just get down and honest and at people's levels. I think I just digressed.
No, no, that's good. I think you brought up a topic that I wasn't even thinking of, but I'm glad you did, and that's social media. And I'm really curious to get your opinion on it, primarily because of what you said, but also there was that Netflix documentary that came out too, where I don't know if you're familiar with it, where they kind of broke down how social media tries to get you addicted and just to continue to use it and some of the tactics that they use.
I haven't watched that, but I know that I have been a victim of social media, and I had to quit social media. This was a few years ago, and because I had to be honest with myself. Was it really being something that was productive for my life? Did I really need it? So for me, just this is talking about Sophie. I found myself one day going home from work. This is when I was still lived in Massachusetts. And I said, oh, I'm going to check my Instagram. And I'm checking my Instagram. I'm supposed to be cooking by now, but I'm still checking my Instagram. All of a sudden, my husband gets home. I had not cooked. So I just wasted my time scrolling. Nothing that was really doing anything for me. I wasn't gaining anything from all that scrolling.
Yeah.
I basically was being nosy, you know? I said, no, that's it. And that's what it took for me to say, I don't need this, just, I could have been doing something for my family right now. But then there's a balance. It doesn't mean that it's bad to scroll. But for me, I decided that's not something that I want in my life, because I also see the benefits of it, where I too participated in like encouraging small clips of, just family life or just anything in general, an encouraging word. But then I said, you know what? There are many people already doing that, and that's okay. Great for them. But I'm not going to do that here.
Come on,
still
Sophie, you can make a
others.
real impact in social media.
I know. And I've had people tell me that. Sophie, why don't you get back on the gram? Why don't you do like a podcast or something? And I'm like, I don't know. Right now, in moving to Texas and trying to adjust to this whole new world, I have other priorities right now. So maybe in the future, but right now I'm good. I enjoy encouraging others behind closed doors at work, and then also serving at my local church and being here for my family. So I'm good.
So in the future, there might be a Sophie podcast coming to a theater near
I
you.
did not say that. I don't know. Yeah.
That's so funny. That's an interesting thing where I feel like we've gotten to a point where we almost, and it's not like we think, I think we just feel that if I didn't post about it, or if it didn't happen on some type of social media, if I didn't share in some way, like it doesn't count.
Mm-mm.
And that's so crazy, because that can stop us from really trying to help people,
Mm.
I've seen clips where, like, I don't know, somebody could be, I mean, those videos that you see, somebody's getting beat up or something. Well, somebody is behind a phone recording and not helping that person,
Right. Right. Yeah. And those are, how they have the highlight reels
Yeah.
in social media. Sometimes that's all it is, and it's fake. I've taken pictures, and I've loved these particular pictures where one of my kids is upset and he looks visibly upset in the picture, and the other one's like squirming. My husband's looking the other way, and I have my big old Kool-Aid smile. Those are my favorite kind of pictures, because they're unadulterated. It's not, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a really good picture where everybody's smiling and they're doing what they're supposed to. But for me, that's a highlight to show we're normal, But I mean, I got to the point where I'm just like, I'm going to share my highlights with the people that I know care about me. So I have a family chat for both sides of my family, and we share those things there. And with close friends that, we still have chats. And that's, to me, those are the people who deserve to see those pictures.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we got to be real careful, because special moments can go by and you don't really end up appreciating it because you're trying to catch it on a camera. It's like maybe you're at a concert that you've been looking forward for 6 months, and you're looking at it, but you're looking at it through the phone versus being there in that moment. I mean, it's a simple example, but, never mind. I don't know, my kid does something cool, and instead of me just being there and being present, I'm trying to record it, and I
Mm-hmm.
just missed that real opportunity to connect with him,
Right. And again, it's a balance, because it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you shouldn't record that special moment, because you could replay it.
Right.
I still do that, but then there are those moments where, there's no camera, and that's okay. It gives you the opportunity to say, hey, do you remember when we did this, or when that happened? We have those moments together, and I love the fact that my husband doesn't like social media, so that also was an encourager. Yeah.
Good on him. That's good. See, it's a balance. I think
Yeah.
that in everything, you just have to, everything's going to have its pros and cons. You just got to make sure that at the end of the day, you're making those decisions, not that something's making it for you, where, you end up, because you're afraid of missing the next story, you end up, scrolling, and by the time you see it's like 12 o'clock and you got to wake up at 6 the next day,
Right,
That's
right.
awesome. I try to set a timer, like, mentally for myself sometimes. Like, if I'm on Instagram and I'm scrolling and I'm there, I'm like, you know what, just 5 more minutes, and then cook, and then I put it down, and then I'm good.
So you
That's
have
how I try to
self-control.
manage. Huh?
You have self-control then. See, I didn't. That's why I had to stop.
And I think you got to do what works for you as an individual. I don't think
Right,
that every single thing is going to work for every person. And I think that
right.
that's definitely something that you got to be mindful. And I mean, and I think in any interaction that you have, it's just like, if I'm talking to somebody, and let's say for whatever reason I left that conversation like maybe frustrated at their way of thinking, it's like, and again, my wife is the one that tends to remind me
Mhm.
a lot of that. It's like, well, we're different people, and maybe we view the world a little bit differently, and what works for somebody doesn't work for another, and maybe it just takes a little bit more time.
You brought something that's really important. Something else that I say to patients, are you sure you're not listening into my sessions? Um,
have a
because
have a recording thing in there.
Yes, because as far as we talk about coping skills, so ways to manage the different emotions, and I say that specifically, what's going to work for one patient may not work for the other. So we need to find something that's going to meet your specific needs, and meet you where you're at, and utilize resources that are accessible to you, because sometimes there are resources that aren't for every single individual. So I like to tap into also what people um, use or were using before they were feeling stressed out. And I ask the question, hey, what is that activity or thing that you did that when you engage in that, you're not feeling anxious, or you're not feeling depressed or worried? And because it's not really about giving people additional resources or additional coping skills, it's to think about something that already was working for you. And because you're so stressed out, it hasn't come to the front of your mind. And that's when people start saying, oh yeah, well, I used to do this, or I used to do that. And I say, yes, why not tap back into that? And that's the goal. And that's when I encourage people, see, you got this. These are things that you can do. But when there's that lack of motivation, that's where it's difficult for many people to kind of get back on track. And it's okay. You can start off by writing several things down, like brainstorming, and then deciding, okay, you sit with a feeling, you're not ignoring it, and then you decide, okay, what specific and attainable, realistic steps can I take in order for this to be an achievable goal, little by little.
So when you're saying resources, it's not necessarily like a community program or resource. It could be, I guess you kind of mentioned something where if somebody did something that distracts their mind or helps them relax or take a breather,
Right,
so those are resources too, is what you're saying. Okay.
right. hmm Anything could really be a resource. I always tell people, as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, go for it. And that's really what it is.
Are there any particular, now that we mentioned that, resources in cities or communities that people may not like necessarily think about that might be available? I mean, I'm sure it's going to range between like different cities, but have you ran into anything that you were like, oh, I didn't know that that was something?
The Essex Art Center over at Lawrence. I love the Essex Art Center. Not only because you can walk in and view the art that's already displayed, but there are different programs that you can sign up for. There's also something like that. It's called Raw Art in Lynn. That one was pretty cool, just because of like the building where it was located. Another resource could be in Lawrence, El Taller. So
Oh
that
yeah,
little restaurant, but sometimes they do like spoken word and
open
just
mics.
the atmosphere, having those tables with and the
The
with
drawing.
yeah, where you could draw little things like that. All that is like therapeutic. Um,
Man, I hope they're doing. I haven't, been there in a while, but I hope they're holding up with everything that's going on because it's definitely a cool spot. Especially,
mhm.
I feel like a lot more like youth, visit and kind of, share their talents in there.
Right, right. So places like that. There's a place called House of Mercy in Lawrence. It's geared more for people with issues with substance use, where they can go have a meal, a place to shower. I don't know all the details, but
Mhm.
that is a place that's still up and running. And of course, your local churches
Yeah,
that sometimes people, stray away from, but within the church community, I know that there are many churches who are serving their communities.
yeah,
And that's what, is supposed to happen, that connection between um, the religious communities and just the community and as a whole, like connecting with the mayor's office and seeing how the church can make an impact there some way, somehow. Where I went in Massachusetts, the church where I went to, it was right next to the Senior Citizen Center. So that's another place where a lot is happening. But I don't know now with COVID what's going
right.
on with all of those centers because of all of the strict rules in Massachusetts. And I get it, safety first.
Yeah. My mom growing up, she was a boss about finding out all these things that were going on in the community. Like I remember as a kid, we would go to the senior center and they had like these activities for children. I remember there were a few different Christmases where some type of program was going on where like we got like boxes of like gifts and stuff. And
Mhm.
I'm just like, oh man, I mean, she was really tapped into like the community and all of the things that were going on. She volunteered at the charter and I'm sure she made a lot of connections there. But,
Mhm.
I often think that, there's a lot more going on in our communities that we're just not aware of because we don't look.
Mhm. There's Groundworks Lawrence as well. There's Lawrence Community Works. There's, an urban city like Lawrence, it's talked down upon a lot. But there's so much history and so many good things that are also happening. So although I'm here in Texas, I represent Lawrence, Massachusetts everywhere I go. Oh yeah. So, and if I could help even from afar just by connecting via a Zoom meeting, then I welcome that too, because I never want to forget where I come from.
No, that's good, and that's one thing that I feel as I'm saying like I've gotten older. I don't think I'm that old. I'm 30, but I don't know what it is, but you just at some point you just start thinking about your community, the things that are going around, how you can help other people. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's kind of like when I turned 21, 22, I started reflecting on my relationship with my parents, and I'm like, dude, like growing up, I was kind of a jerk. I just remember like small little things that I did. Like I'll give you a perfect example. So my dad, he worked a seasonal job, and he would get lay off for like 3 months out of the year. So in that time, what he would do is he would go and he'd taxi. He'd just go to Market Basket or whatever. Back when it was somewhat legal. Right now, you can't really do that. But he would go and he would he would you know try to pick up rides and take people to the house and make a little extra cash. And when I was a teenager, wanting to go out with my friends and stuff, I vividly remember this one day I'm calling him because he's not home yet, and it's like 6 something, and I'm trying to go out with my friends. And man, he gets home and I chew him out. And my dad is such like a patient guy. He didn't like really yell at me or anything. And I reflect on it. I'm just like, dude, like how self-centered, like such a jerk. Like this man is just trying to provide for his family, and you're like giving him crap because you want to go have like some fun with your friends.
Mhm. So you're saying at one point you were entitled.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm glad that you're able to mature.
Those teenage years, man. Those teenage years. I think it hits everybody at some point.
Oh yeah, of course. I have kids, and yeah, I try to bring them down. I'm like, hold on, buddy. Like, no. We gotta earn things, and things don't happen just because you want them. If we go to a store, and I see a bunch of things that I like, it doesn't mean that I'm gonna buy it because I really don't need it. So there's always a lesson everywhere in in life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Hey, I know that we agreed on an hour, so I don't want to take up a ton of time. And I know that we got our schedules kind of mixed. So one of the things that I did want to touch on before we kind of closed out was, you mentioned the pandemic and what's going on. And I've definitely read like articles that, divorce has gone up, domestic
Mm-hmm.
abuse. You also mentioned that has gone up. People are just feeling like cooped up. It's almost like people have been forced to now spend more time with each other where, before because of work and everything else, maybe that didn't happen. So I guess my question to you is, what things or what resources can we use to help us during this time that we weren't really expecting and a lot of people may have not been prepared for?
I mean, I don't think anyone was prepared for a pandemic, but something that I bring up with my patients is that, we could be organized individuals, but everything does not always go as planned. So we must understand that, like truly understand that everything does not go as planned. But because everything doesn't go as planned, we need to be people who learn to be solution focused. That even if I don't have the solution right in front of me, to be people who are hopeful for a plan. And that plan is going to look different from person to person. Again, because there aren't going to be the same resources accessible to each individual. So it's utilizing what you have. So thinking about, let's say I'm kind of a visual person, so I would draw a circle and say, what are those things that are within your control? Within this circle, those are those things that are within your control. And then we talk about what are those things that are outside of your control. And let's be honest, because sometimes we also want to control the things that are outside of our control. And that's when sometimes the anxiety, the worry, the frustration comes in, because we're trying to control these things that we just don't have at our, reach. So when people would come in talking about, oh my God, I wish this is over. I wish this is over. Oh, these people, they need to hurry up and come up with a vaccine and all this stuff. I would say, I've learned to know that, scientists are working really hard. I can't imagine the stress that they're under. This is a worldwide problem. So I was gonna say, I'm gonna let the scientists do their thing, and I'm gonna sit back and follow the rules that are suggested. I'm gonna wear my mask, I'm gonna wash my hands, and keep at a distance as best as possible. Those are sometimes the only things that we can do. And then when I was talking earlier about self-care, see how you can, bring down some of those emotions by engaging in those things that previously brought you that joy, that comfort. It turns a little bit sour or tricky when there is domestic violence. So we try to encourage people to utilize the specific hotlines that are accessible. Like there's a national domestic violence hotline, and it's done in a in a way where the survivor of it or the victim of it is not going to be put in a situation where they're going to get hurt by calling that line, because they have volunteers who know what words to say that will help them out. So that's when I say there's not a cookie cutter order of things that we are to do, because everyone's life is different. And sometimes you know how they say, how if you have a glass of water, are you looking at it half full or half empty? So it's all those corny little scenarios that are real though. And we can apply them to our lives. So are you gonna wallow in distress, or are you gonna try to do something to help yourself, even if that something is just saying, I don't have the solution, but I'm hopeful that by me following the rules that so far have been given to us, that's gonna keep me safe as best as possible. Also thinking about different things that maybe, or quotes that could be of motivation. I love going on Pinterest. That I do have. And I'll find motivational quotes. And like I had said before, I connect with my faith. So I find different verses that'll motivate me to keep on going. And those things I also share in session, because believe it or not, people are waiting for that a specific word of hope. And it's not like this corny little thing to say, oh, everything's going to get better. No, because it's guaranteed that we're going to have problems of all sorts, whether we have a pandemic or not. That is guaranteed. But what's not guaranteed is how we're going to respond to those things. So equipping ourselves with whatever it is that works, like I said before, as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, that's perfectly fine. Move forward with what works for you. You can do a simple Google search, coping skills. You'll find a whole bunch of stuff if you're truly feeling stuck, And so that's another way to take advantage of technology and using it for your own good. Listening to music that's going to lift you up, because even that music is so powerful. I'll have people come into session and they'll let me know, oh yes, my coping skill is music. But when you start asking, what exactly is it that you're listening to? Oh, when I'm depressed, I listen to sad songs because, I connect with those sad songs, and they just know exactly what, I'm going through. And I get it. I was like, yeah, it's nice to feel connected, that somebody, has walked in your shoes. But then do you feel better after listening to that sad song? And the typical answer is no. Some people may say yes, because it was like I released what I had to, but then it kind of comes again. So I try to encourage people to look at the lyrics, and usually when that happens, it's like, oof, mine is blown. Oh wow! I mean, there are some songs that straight up are about suicide, and it leads people to that happening. And it's just crazy how those things are even legal, to have accessible to especially young people who are, deciding to move forward with stuff like that. So when it comes to coping skills, there's not that one thing that we can do. But what we do notice is that many things start with a thought. And if you allow that thought to sit there, and especially if it's a negative thought, and you don't learn to reframe that thought, or it doesn't mean that, oh yes, think positive, think positive. If you think positive, it's, everything's going to get better. Not necessarily, but at least you're trying to do something that is the opposite of that negative thought, and it's about replacing the thought, but also having an accompanied action step to go with it, that you could be intentional and then consistent with.
As you were talking about all these resources and things that you could potentially use, I'm reading a leadership book right now, and one of the concepts is that because something worked for somebody else, or because something even worked for you once doesn't mean that it will work again.
Right.
Is that accurate to say in this in this case?
I
And
agree.
yeah,
100%. We're all different.
yeah,
Even therapists, you're not going to find the same exact therapist everywhere that you go. So that's something else that I explain to people. Sometimes I feel like I'm apologizing for negative experiences in therapy, um, because we're all human beings. So we're not all going to have the same approach to things. And, I tell my patients, if you feel that I'm not meeting your needs, you are not forced to stay with me. You have that right to
like
say,
that.
oh yeah, I tell them straight up, just what I just told you. I tell them just that, because it's in my interest that you know that you have rights and that I'm not the only therapist out there. And if all that I can do for you is connect you with somebody else, then that still is meeting your need. Because, for example, I don't specialize in substance use. Yes, some of my patients use certain substances, but when it's a case of, um, for example, without giving any identifying um, or factors or characteristics, someone that came into my office with who recently stopped using substances, um, and then started using another substance, yes, to replace those others. Substance use was still um, the priority for that individual. And so because I don't specialize in substance abuse, I needed to know I need to know my limits. I can't treat every single person that walks into my office. So although we built pretty nice rapport, I wanted to make sure that that person's need was met. And when there's, let's say, co-occurring situations, whether there's that substance abuse and accompanied with depression, the substance abuse has to be treated first. So I connected that person. I gave them a list of providers, but also not only that, then I follow up to make sure that they actually connect and, to not just drop them and say like, bye, I can't see you anymore. Because we have to understand that not every person that walks into our office is going to be someone that we're going to connect with. And sometimes people just don't want it. Sometimes people just aren't ready. And it's my desire to just encourage people, whether I only see them one time or if I'm going to continue to see them.
So one last question, I promise, just to wrap
Mhm.
up, because this just came to mind. And you know, to do your job, I feel like you would require a lot of self-awareness, because I feel like, in your need to help, maybe you may potentially not end up helping. And I guess I'll bring it into like my field. Some people can develop like a hero's complex, meaning like, I have to solve this, only I can do this, nobody else can. But if
Mhm.
your knowledge or your limit is beyond that, then if a company is down, you could potentially be causing more harm than good. So
Mhm.
I guess the last question that I have for you is, for somebody that feels like they need help, um, what are things that they should be thinking about when they are trying to seek for that help, or maybe they're meeting with people such as yourself that are willing to help, to make sure that it's a right fit for them as well?
Are you asking how do you find a particular type of therapist, or how to
Not
ask?
necessarily a particular type, but um, make sure that that person is somebody that could help you, or what things can you look for that maybe this is not working for me, maybe I should explore maybe another person in your field, or
Mhm.
something
Yeah.
different.
So that goes back to my statement of telling my patients that if I'm not meeting their needs, that they have the right to, one, tell me that, and two, you know, move forward with somebody else. So that means that I would recommend, if I am like therapist shopping, I want to make sure, one, why am I looking for support? What is my need? Because I need to advocate for what I need. So in my previous experience, from being a patient, one, I knew that I needed somebody that was culturally sensitive. I knew that I needed someone who also, for my purposes, I wanted someone who was faith-based, because you can do that too. You can find therapists from different, religious backgrounds. So if that's really important for you, you can find someone that will meet those needs. You also, time plays a factor too. Some therapists only work, 4 days a week, between the hours of 9 and 4, but you're working and you get out at 5. So you need a therapist that could see you at 6 o'clock. So that's also very important. So it's basically finding someone who's truly going to meet your needs. But you won't know that unless you write down what your needs are, and then say, okay, I need these needs met. So I'm going to go, like, let's say on Psychology Today. There's a lot of therapists who are on that platform. So they have like a little bio of what they offer to their patients. Sometimes it's kind of, pretty straightforward what's listed, but then sometimes I've had the experience of like, oh yeah, they it's like a sales pitch. And then when you're in front of the individual, it's not what's presented in front of you is not exactly what was in their bio. But that's okay. It's trial and error. So don't give up just because you have a sour experience. There is the right therapist for everyone. There are many, many people. You could have virtual sessions. You could have just telephone sessions. You could have individual sessions. Making sure that your needs are being met. That's the most important thing. You have an issue, look for patient therapists who specialize in the condition that you're experiencing. Believe it or not, people specialize in a lot of things that you probably say, like, really, what? There's, like sexologists, that's not my area, but okay, there's somebody for that too. There's like animal assisted therapy. There's equine therapy. I think that's amazing. There's art therapy, there's music therapy. So it's just about you figuring out what your needs are and then move forward and start typing in. Let's see if this person kind of matches my style. Sometimes so I also say, don't judge a book by its cover. Not everybody is gonna maybe have the look that you want, or sometimes they have the look and then when you're in front of them, it's like, I don't know about this. I mean, I say it from personal experience. I think people have walked into my office and they see that I'm kind of just a regular person. And I think that's important because, to not be all high and mighty and a know-it-all. So a more relaxed atmosphere. Or if you want an intellectual meeting, then go for it. You'll find that provider as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Man, so
does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think so. This was awesome, man. It's an area in this world that I had very little knowledge, and it was awesome to be able to connect with you, hear you out, hear your ideas on how you help people and how you focus your life in that way. I think it's very admirable. I appreciate that you shared a lot of personal experiences, because it helps relate that, hey, like, I'm not the only one that it's going through issues.
Mm-hmm.
But I just I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today, for sure.
No, I'm honored to be, sharing and utilizing technology for good.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks a lot. And who knows, maybe we can do a part 2 after the pandemic's over or something.
All right, I'll welcome that. At Central and Eastern time, connecting the
Yes. We gotta figure that. Yeah, that Very rookie move on my part, assuming that we were on the same time zone there.
It's okay. Thank you so much.